So, well, Josh, I'm going to certainly comment on this album, but I'm going to turn over the lead of this last segment to you for Spoon. You can share your relationship with the band, what you know about the band, and lead me along the
Yeah,
way.
sure. So I think we're going to talk about Spoon again, probably in the 2000s.
Multiple
Yeah,
times.
right.
Yeah.
They are a critically beloved band. They're often cited as one of kind of the most consistent indie rock bands in terms of quality of albums and songcraft. The band itself is led by lead singer Britt Daniel. He's been with the band the entire time, and the other person who has been with the band is Jim Eno on drums. They're
No relation to Brian.
no. They are from Texas originally, kind of north of Austin, in the Austin area. So that's where they got their start. This is
You
their
answered a question I had because they could have been from like 15 different places, I feel like, for
Right.
me. So I'm glad that you cleared that up.
Yeah. Britt Daniels from Temple, Texas, which is like an hour north of Austin, but the band kind of formed in Austin, and then kind of expanded from there. This is their second studio album. This is when, at this point in their career, they got signed to a major label, to Elektra Records. So the band, backing up a little bit, the band put out their first album, a Telephono, on Merge Records. Not Merge Records, I'm sorry, Matador Records. And it did poorly in sales. And so I guess the experience with Matador wasn't the greatest for them, based on what I read. And then but they were getting it's weird because they were like getting enough buzz that they got signed to a major label, right? Elektra picked them up. At this point, they had actually already finished this album when Elektra signed them. So basically, they were going to get paid a lot more money. They were going to release this album, and they had the hopes that Elektra was really going to like help them out and do stuff. And this album came out. That label did not like promote them at all. Did not promote the album. This album sold poorly as well. It got good reviews critically, but it was still kind of like not where the band wanted to be, and they were on the verge of like having, as Britt Daniel said in an article, like they had two albums that didn't sell, one on an indie label, so they failed on the indie label level, and then they failed on the major label level. So they were, after this album, they were really in a period of like, are we still going to be a band? Like, do we form a different band? Like, what do we do? And so we'll pick up that story later on in 2000 or 2001 with the next album, Girls Can Tell, which is where I came into the band. That's the first album that I heard by them, and they kind of like blew my mind, and that's why they've been kind of my favorite ever since. So that's kind of a short snapshot of this band.
Great job on the fly.
Yeah. Well, I read a bunch of articles today kind of in prep, and just kind of because I had not listened to this album in a long time. And so I was trying to like kind of piece together their timeline. You know, they have like, I don't know what album they're at. You know, they just released some new singles incidentally because they're putting out a new album soon, but they have like, I don't know, 14 albums or something at this point. So what is your relationship with Spoon besides just knowing them through me?
As crazy as it sounds, I have limited to no relationship with Spoon.
Yeah.
Not because I did not like them when I heard them. I just, for whatever reason, I don't know. It wasn't like I didn't think I'd like them. It's kind of like I never got around to them. I'd describe it similar to like Belle and Sebastian, where there was no reason I didn't listen to them. I just never got around to them. And I don't want to think that I was sort of superficial enough that I was picking bands by what their name was, but I can't help but think part of what kind of drove me to like put them on the back burner was maybe I was like, Spoon. I don't quite know what I hate to say that, but there's certain bands like the Pixies and Sonic Youth where I'm like, I need to hear what this band has to say because of the name. And I do think it's so funny too, because a couple of the bands that come to mind immediately for this probably fall in that category too. So realistically, it's going to be so much fun, Josh. I feel like I'm going to be like you when you talked about the Talking Heads.
Yeah,
where you're
yeah.
like, I'm a little bit familiar with them, but I really don't feel like I could speak to them literally, but I have a feeling I'm gonna love them, right? I feel like that's how I feel about this album. Is so fascinating because on one hand, it feels like a step back to the late 70s. There's like Wire was the first thing that I thought of. Here. I'm like, oh shit, this is like a Wire album in 1998. Pavement, right? Guided by Voices, the Pixies at times.
Yep.
Like all that stuff, Television, Gang of Four. I don't want to just keep dropping stuff, but
Right.
all of those bands, especially from the late 70s, right, were really where I went back to immediately. Because they have sort of that lo-fi sound. There's a little jangle in their sound. There's a little art rock in their sound here. And I think we all know how I feel about like I feel in some ways late 70s underground rock was in the deepest bench of any time that we've covered, for my opinion. So on one hand, it's like, wow, these guys sound like the late 70s. They are sort of a continuation of this awesomeness. And then there's another foot where it's like, how was this album released in 1998? Because it feels like it should have been released in 2004, right?
Yeah.
It feels years ahead of where it would have been neatly categorized. And I think because of that, I really appreciate it. But it also probably hurt it because it's crazy to think that someone was playing this music in 1998 because it felt like the period when it was not in the movie theater, right?
Yes,
And then it it was waiting for like the revision of this type of music to come back. And they kind of just had to wait till like 2001 when the Strokes and White Stripes like poked into it a little bit. And then 3 years later, the bands were there. Now, I don't want to say they're exactly like that because they're not. They're their own thing. So let me start by saying that. But it is funny that they're sort of like not of the next wave that comes later, but they're after the first wave of it, right? So it's kind of wild, like where this falls in the timeline of like when this was, and probably that's why it wasn't successful, right? Because people. I don't know, are they listening to Creed and Filter, right? Like at this point, like they'd kind of like exhausted, or maybe you know what it was? It's they were listening to the bands like Guided by Voices and Bell and Sebastian and Pavement and stuff that Sonic Youth, right? That don't exactly sound like them, right? But that's like that was on their playlist, right?
Yeah.
And that's where it was residing in the like this is really good shit, but a certain amount of people are going to now like this. And of course we found out later, like, no, there's going to be a lot of people who like this.
Right.
So that kind of encapsulates a little bit like my first listen, like, oh, I absolutely am going to, if this is, I have a little bit of an idea of their lane. I think another barrier for me with Spoon is that I've heard like 3 or 4 of their songs and 3 of them I really like, but the first song I ever heard from them was The Underdog.
Oh,
and
which is their biggest
don't like that song
by far.
Yeah, it's one of the few songs I don't like that I've heard of them, and I think it sort of queered the water, as they speak a little bit, in terms of like what I thought they sounded like. It's not a bad song, it just, there was nothing about it that really like resonated with me. I also, to go back, there's a little bit of like what Vampire Weekend would be later, like in this as well. I feel like to some degree, where they're merging backwards looking influences, right, from another time, but also incorporating sort of art rock influences that aren't maybe a better example, like before this would be like what the Talking Heads did, where there's like there's a convention to what they're doing, but there's also an art rock spin on it that doesn't make it sound conventional, if that makes sense. And you could certainly see how this band would be a predecessor to something like the Arctic Monkeys later too, for sure. So, but I really like this album. It flew by. It's very much in my lane in terms of the guitar parts of what I like. Another comparison, I'm just throwing out all of these. I'm just showing all of the stuff I've learned on CTS. And so I'm sure people were like, oh my God, this guy. But I also think it's sort of like if you took some of what Pavement does, but you didn't have them play in, off chords, and the singing was more standard. There's a lot, you know what I mean? It's like you tweak it to make it more radio friendly than what Pavement was, which is kind of wild because Pavement had a song on MTV, right? Which is wild to think about, right, at the time. But this comes 4 years later and can't get played anywhere.
Right. Yeah. Spoon was not a band that had this album did not have singles, was not like on MTV at all. Yeah.
Well, and like my take is if something like Lafitte Don't Fail Me Now, right? Like comes out in 1994. There's no way that's not on MTV, right? But it missed its window when they were signing up everybody and taking chances, and it's a little bit before, they were like, we're taking chances again on this retro sound. So it just was a very fascinating album for me that way. But I was a big fan of this album. It was really enjoyable, and it definitely passed the test of, do I want to hear more of like what they do? I was very on the record of loving the band Wire. We've covered them twice, and boy, that was immediate on this album at least. Do they maintain that?
Yes, I would say so. Yes, I think this is a promise of things to come, and I think they get better from here.
Wow. Okay.
I think they maintain the hallmarks of a lot of the things that you mentioned. The band has
Wire's like multiple different things, by the way. So maybe I should classify like the first introduction to Wire was just Pink Flag, right?
Yeah. So Spoon. So a couple things. Like I'm glad you like the album. I'm glad it's. It would be weird if you like didn't like this album because I feel like it's
for sure.
They are at the end of the day a rock band. They are kind of more of an, like you said, name checked a lot of the band's CTS hits. It's interesting listening to Spoon after having gone through the CTS journey, because now I see like kind of all of the bands that we loved early on in like the 70s, like you said, that Spoon was influenced by. Like me knowing Spoon but not knowing like their influences, like now I can see the connective tissue between like through the decades. The other band that you didn't name that I think is important is Elvis Costello. I think they have an Elvis Costello quality to them that makes their songs really catchy to me, and to others. And they have like a songcraft with them that they can craft those kind of like,
in particular, the way they're sang.
They have a real like Wire. They have a real like angularity to their playing. Great and they also kind of play with space a bit in an interesting way, which I also like. Other kind of things that carry through that from this album, like they always kind of use that like echo effect in the vocals that comes up here, and like distortion and feedback, those come up again as well. This is just a solid. Spoon also kind of gets better the more you listen to him, and I found that the case with this album as well. Things kind of unlock the more I find that you listen to it. Another thing I think you'll find interesting is to their name. Spoon got their name from a Can song. We talked about Can way back in the day. So
you can hear a little bit of Can in this too, especially that Lafitte Don't Fail Me Now song at the end. Yep.
And it's interesting you bring up that song, because that song and the last song, The Agony of Lafitte, are not original to this album. They were released as singles after the fact, and then they were later, when they got signed to Merge label, they added these songs on the re-release of this album. So Lafitte was their A&R guy at Elektra, and so that was a story about kind of their frustrations with Elektra, the label, and them. Kind of I read that they thought of the name of the song first, kind of a play on words of Feet Don't Fail Me Now.
Well, and you know what's funny? It's like in some ways lyrically it covers the same ground as all of Matt's beloved like Wilco songs, but I don't know what it is. It speaks to me more. It doesn't feel like I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like I don't feel like I'm sitting in the backyard, with middle-aged people drinking a craft beer. With that, I feel like more like I'm at like a kind of like a cool nightclub a little bit, where this band's coming on at like 10:45 and I'm out with my friends like processing a breakup and life being complicated, and that's more my lane, I think.
Yeah, Britt Daniel's an interesting guy. He's like the only thing he ever wanted to do is be like a rock star, and so like that's his like whole focus in life is like to make Spoon like a rock band and like live the rock
most
star
guys go
lifestyle.
the Kiss Van Halen route for that, right?
Right.
He's like, let's take Wire and Pavement as touch points. Yeah.
So yeah, but Lafitte, Don't Fail Me Now, that's a great song. I think
It sure is.
there's a lot of great songs on here. Did you have any other highlights of songs that stood out to you on this album?
Sure, there were the other song I picked for. I was deciding between Quincy Punk Episode and Metal Detector, which are very different songs as the songs I would have picked for the second one. I ended up going with Quincy Punk Episode, which is a little bit more traditional. If it wasn't as short as 129, Car Radio is a really great song too that just fires by. There's other songs I like, but those were the four that like if we were talking about narrowing it down to the two for the playlist, were the ones I considered, but I ultimately went with Lafitte, Don't Fail Me Now, and Quincy Punk Episode.
Yeah, those are almost all the ones I would have picked as well. I like Reservations a lot too. That's the fourth track. But yeah, there's not really any bad ones. I'll be interested to see how you think they evolve sound-wise, if they do, kind of where they go. I haven't listened to their albums like chronologically in a long time. I kind of always jump around and listen to different tracks off different ones.
We're doing the one you mentioned as the one that got you into the band. We're doing that one. Is there one called Ga 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 or something like that?
Yes, that's later on. Ga 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 Ga, 5 Gas.
Yes, I remember seeing that when we put it down. That one's there. And I do feel like there might even be a fourth one that we cover. So I think we're going to see Spoon at least 4 times. And if I like them, I reserve the right to have them, more in these bonus episodes. So
excellent. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to bring up. No, they're just like kind of great in my opinion. So I'll be interested to see what you think of the next album and what Matt thinks too. I don't think he's literally listened to much. Spoon.
He's gonna love this album.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Yeah,
But so after Elektra, they get signed to Merge Records, and that's kind of where they've I think stayed for a lot of their albums.